Good morning, Ben.
Hi, John. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us on this divorce literacy spotlight. I'm glad you agreed to join us.
I really appreciate you offering.
Absolutely. So I'm going to introduce you real quick, and then we'll learn more about your practice.
Sounds good.
Okay. Ben Stich is a divorce, co-parenting, and family mediator. Ben fell in love with mediation after taking a training in 2009, and his mediation journey led him to establish Mediation and Family Services in 2014. He has since mediated hundreds of divorces and family disputes, helping families stay in control of their decisions while saving time, money, and heartache. Ben is also a divorce coach for divorces following the collaborative law model. In addition to mediation and collaborative law, he is also an instructor for Williams James College High Conflict Co-Parenting Program, trains collaborative programs, solving MGH psychiatric things kids program, and is on the board of directors for Massachusetts Council of Family Mediation. Ben regularly presents workshops on mediation and divorce. Well, that is impressive, Ben.
Thank you. Sorry, it's a jumble of words there.
That's okay. Little tongue twist, and I talk funny. That's okay. I'll work on that. So I got to ask you a question. So with mediation, I want you to take me through the process, but the first step, someone calls you or you meet with someone. Is there a process to even evaluate if they even want to get divorced?
So that's an interesting question, John. So first of all, I offer a free half-hour consult. And so the first thing I ask in the consultation, and I encourage people to be very brief in this so that there's enough time for me to share information about mediation, but I always ask, what brings you here today? Why are you interviewing a mediator? And so off the bat, I usually can get a sense as to whether or not they're looking to move forward with a divorce, whether they're looking to move forward with interim or temporary separation, but they really want to strengthen the marriage. I had a consult right before this. I didn't know really much about what was happening, and I walked out understanding that, they're struggling and they're really committed to improving the relationship. Use mediation because therapy hasn't been successful, and sometimes couples aren't on the same page, and sometimes the mediation is more about trying to figure out whether they're going to stay married or get divorced. At the end of the day, in Massachusetts, it only takes one spouse to trigger divorce proceedings. But sometimes the first part of mediation is to explore that. And then the process is very goal-oriented. And so whatever the parties' goals are, and I help them uncover those at the very early part of the process, will drive what's discussed. And of course, if it's divorce, then yes, there are some things that has to be addressed, right, to be able to satisfy the expectations that probate and family court has. And there are plenty of times when mediation steers itself into another direction. And if that's what they want, then I'll help facilitate that conversation.
Okay.
That was a long-winded answer. Was that what you were getting at, John?
Yeah, no, definitely. And it kind of leads me to the next question, and which you've kind of touched upon already, is how do you feel you could be most helpful with your role as a mediator?
So I was once asked, and I was a little uncomfortable with the question, but like, what's my mediator superpower?
Yes.
And I feel like that's kind of what you're asking.
Yes.
It's hard to distill it down to one thing, but I guess I would say two things. One is that I'm really basically being a translator for my clients, and really helping ensure that the other person really understands what's being said, what the interests are, so that the whatever solutions they come up with address the concerns that both parties have. I've been told by clients like, oh, that's what he or she's been saying for the last 10 years. I wish I had you to translate for us way back when. So I think really just helping facilitate effective communication and helping people move away from a kind of combative positional dynamic to really talking about the things that are most important to them. The other thing is that prior to mediation, I worked in child welfare and with families. as a social worker, running treatment programs, working within schools. And so helping parents through divorce is something I'm, while I work with people who don't have children all the time, is probably something that sets me apart a little bit, particularly if they're parents of children with special needs, because as someone with a social work background, I understand that world. I understand special education, and I think some parents find it really freeing to know that they don't have to explain things because I already understand the system,
Right.
and can understand how those needs might impact the way someone might structure a parenting plan in a divorce.
I got it. So with all the clients that you had, is there like a typical, like a common question that just keeps coming up that's asked of you during mediation?
Yeah. Do I need an attorney?
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I mean, there are a lot of questions they're asking me, but that is from a divorce standpoint, a really common question. There's so many misconceptions out there. The answer is they certainly need an attorney to draft their final agreement, which is called the separation agreement. I offer them to work with a neutral attorney who can be a drafter. I recommend every party has what I call a mediation-friendly divorce attorney, so they can get advice and maximize their informed decision-making, and let them know that the judge is going to ask them if they've understood they have a right to seek independent counsel. And one of my goals, I have really probably two goals when I discuss that with folks. One is for them to really understand that mediators are not allowed to give legal advice as a neutral, because
Okay.
always to maintain impartiality, regardless of one's background as a mediator. And so I really want to make sure they understand that there's two separate roles. And the second is to let them know that I recommend it to maximize informed decision making. And at the end of the day, it's really up to them. There's no rule or requirement that says someone has to have independent counsel.
Okay. Now, this next question, because I knew it was going to come up sooner or later, in terms of, and that has to do with same-sex couples.
Okay.
And I understand you've worked with those clients before. Is it the same, whether it's same sex or not, or is there a different, do they each have like unique challenges that you find?
It's an interesting question, and because as soon as I log off with you, 5 minutes later, I'm having a divorce mediation with two women.
Okay.
That's my next session that's scheduled. I mean, I think it's really about having a sensitivity to the unique challenges same-sex couples have gone through. Many of the divorces I have are folks who have been, like, in their minds and hearts, married for longer than they've been legally married because of same-sex marriage wasn't always legal. Occasionally there are some issues related to guardianship and legal custodial rights that need to be addressed. And at the end of the day, it's all the same decisions that need to be made. Sometimes the dynamics I find are slightly different, but just like in couple with divorces with a husband and a wife, some people are very cooperative and supportive of each other through the process. Some are very high conflict, and everything kind of in between.
Okay. All right. Is there a particular case that has impacted you the most as to how you are doing your practice these days?
I do. There was, and this was the very beginning of my career. I mean, so this was probably 10 years ago or so. It was, how much time do you have? No,
Plenty of time.
that was a joke. So it was a divorce with one was a blue collar, self-employed. The other was very intellectual and kind of was a thought leader in her industry. And their communication styles were completely opposite. Their visions for their children's future were completely opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, we mediated therapy, for example, right? They were diametrically opposed on everything. And I actually co-mediated that case, in part because I wasn't experienced yet. And we both were so grateful that we had a co-mediation so that we could debrief with each other regularly. And we both have agreed that it was probably the most challenging case we've ever had in our career. If we had the bandwidth, we could have written a book, because basically every mediator challenge that presents itself played out in that case.
Wow.
And it was the mediation with the most number of sessions I've ever had. They ended up withdrawing from mediation, tried to work through their attorneys. We heard from them 6 months later. We're not making progress. We want to work back with you. Their attorneys ended up getting involved in the mediation process, which is fine. But their attorneys got so entangled in their clients' stories, we ended up having to mediate between the attorneys more than we had to mediate between the parties.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, they came to an agreement and they got divorced through mediation without litigating. So it was very, very gratifying. And it was really, really challenging.
Wow, that's great. Do you have any tips for couples considering divorce mediation?
I definitely would encourage folks to interview mediators, make sure that whoever they choose to work with is really a fit for them. I think that idea of fit is really important because it's such a personal process. And you really need to trust the impartiality and, of course, the competence of the mediator. I encourage people to think about their goals for the process and the ways in which they can navigate the communication in a way that's future-oriented and constructive, rather than trying to rehash or relitigate the past in the mediation process. And of course, there's a big financial disclosure process and starting to collect that information. The more folks have that information on hand at the outset, the faster the process can be, because it can be more efficient. And then in terms of like the homework related to mediation, my guidance to folks is to do as much as you can offline that doesn't create more conflict and tension. And if once they start treading that line, that's also why I exist and what the process is helpful for.
Well, that's great. And how would they get a hold of you if they need your service?
I appreciate that. So my website is benstich.com, benstich.com. Everyone misspells it with 2 T's.
Yeah.
So actually, if you misspell it, it'll redirect to my site. But it's benstich.com. My email is easy. It's ben@benstich.com. My phone number is 617-872-7731. And then when people go on my website, you can send me a direct message, you can schedule consults, you can call me, whatever is most comfortable for folks.
All right, that's awesome. Well, Ben, this has been great, and I'm glad you jumped on the spotlight with us today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's really fun, and I appreciate the work you do, John. It really, things like the services you offer really help clients who are going through divorce find a way to make it work.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. There is life after divorce, and we try to set the couples up in the best light possible for that.
Absolutely.
So, all right, you have a wonderful day, Ben.
Thank you, you too, John.
Okay.